So welcome to IPE City. It's a pleasure to see you again. We are all here in Florianópolis, Brazil, excited to hear a little bit about the future of healthcare.
Cool, great. Well, thank you. Thanks for everybody to be here, and I'll share some slides. Okay, great. So I'll tell you guys about longevity biotech, the field working on extending healthy lifespan, and also the DeSci field, decentralized science, and what we may be able to bring to Brazil. So my own background, who am I? I'm a longevity scientist by training. I've been in the field over 10 years. I did my master's and part of a PhD in Europe. I left Oxford to co-found a biotech company that became fairly prominent called Cambrian Bio. We raised over $200 million. We have 2 drugs in the clinic. And I also helped launch a number of other biotech companies and venture funds. So yeah, in summary, I'm a longevity scientist. I've co-founded a couple biotech companies. I've also co-founded or worked at several venture capital funds investing in biotech companies. These are some of the DeSci companies that I advise, Molecule, Vitadel, and Bio. You may be familiar with them. And if you want to know more from this talk, you can check out some other talks on YouTube that I've given. If you want to get into the longevity biotech field, I recommend the LongBio Fellowship shown here. This is a large organization of founders, scientists, and investors who do conferences every year, and it's a great community of people. So I help run a venture fund today, Long Game Ventures. We've invested in over a dozen companies to date. You can check out our website, LongGame BC, for more info. We also, at Healthspan Capital, released a report profiling the top 50 longevity biotech companies in the space, and you can download that on our website if you want to know more. Here's another shot of it. Okay, so why is it so important to slow the aging process? Because health is more important than wealth. Warren Buffett, one of the richest guys in the world, said I would give up all of my money to be young again in a heartbeat. So this baby, even though the broke baby, is actually better off than Warren Buffett. And when you're really sick, no amount of money can bail you out or can do much for you. So we need to invest in biomedical innovation now so that it's ready by the time we and our families and the world actually need it, because it takes a long time to be developed. So aging drives 90% of diseases and 90% of deaths. And most of pharma doesn't really target the root cause of these diseases, which is aging itself. But some good news is that there's a field of science called geroscience working on slowing the biology of aging, slowing the damage that causes aging. Here you can see the Fountain of Youth painting. So here's one example. These 2 mice are the same age, but one was treated with a rejuvenating longevity drug, and they suffer from an accelerated aging disease. And you can see the untreated animal, it has cataracts, it can't see well, it's got hunching, arthritis, problems with the fur, whereas the treated mouse is looking good. And this isn't just a one-off example. There are many cases, many examples, hundreds of different kinds of interventions in the lab all over the world that extend lifespan. So some bad news is we have the silver tsunami, the global demographic aging crisis. So the population is getting older and we're not having enough kids to replace them, and demography is destiny. So you can see in the year 2010, the countries in red are those where over 20% of the population are older than retirement age or 65, so Western Europe and Japan. If you fast forward to 2050, it's basically the entire developed world. Brazil doesn't look so good either. And no government has a credible plan to address this. There's some good news, though, which is biological immortality on a cellular level is physically possible. It's been known to be possible since the dawn of life on this planet, and I'll get into why. And there was a Nobel Prize awarded to a technology called Yamanaka reprogramming that resets the biological age of cells from any age to a day 0 embryonic stem cell. This is a concept called germline immortality and the disposable soma theory of aging. Basically, how is it possible that 2 adults of age, whatever their age is, 30, 40, have a kid that is brand new every time, and they can do that generation and generation. Those cells are being passed down from your parents and their parents and their parents, all the way back to the dawn of life on this planet. And those cells don't age, they maintain their youth. So how is that possible? That's germline immortality. And it's due to these germ cells, these reproductive embryonic stem cells, which are shown here. Here's another shot of them, sometimes called the God cell. These embryonic stem cells can become any cell type in the body, from a liver cell to a brain cell. So geroscience is a new paradigm of medicine. You may be aware that aging is an exponential function, where even if we cure cancer, all kinds of cancer tomorrow, it would only extend population lifespan by 2 or 3 years because something else would hit, right? So the only way you could extend your healthy period of life is to slow aging itself. Traditional pharma, it gets you a couple of extra years at the end of life. What we want to do is add healthy years. So the antibiotics revolution is similar to the geroscience or longevity revolution. At the turn of the 20th century, one of the leading causes of death was bacterial infection. And now it's very rare to die from bacterial infection in the developed world because of these silver bullet antibiotics. And at the time, in the turn of the 20th century, nobody would have believed you if you said, we're going to have these antibiotic miracle drugs soon. And so similarly, I'm hoping that we will have that in longevity. Here's some of the underlying biology, the advances made in the biochemistry that allow us to leverage and harness this knowledge in therapeutics. Here's another diagram with some of the pathways that are involved in that paper. Here's a list of a couple interventions, drugs and genetic interventions that extend lifespan in mice and by the percentage of lifespan extension. And there are many of these now. Here's a list of some more that we'll get into in a second. Skip that. So here's another example of a lifespan intervention. You can get almost about 30% lifespan extension. This was published in Nature, the #1 scientific journal in the world, by ablating or deleting, eliminating these senescent cells. So these senescent cells are kind of damaged, stressed out cells that accumulate with age, and they look like this on the right versus the normal healthy cells. If you can eliminate them with a drug or genetically, it extends lifespan and it reverses and slows the aging process. So I showed you this already. Another example is heterochronic parabiosis, where you link the circulatory systems of an old and a young mouse such that they share blood. And this research has gotten a lot of interesting attention, for being like a vampire or whatever. You don't actually need to steal any young blood. We actually are developing drugs based on this knowledge now. It'll just be a pill. Rapamycin is another interesting example. So this is a lifespan extending drug that is FDA approved, and it consistently extends lifespan across species. Here's some of the data shown here. And this drug is being taken by people today, and it will slow aging, but it has some side effects. So zooming out to give you an overview of the LongBio ecosystem. This is a chart shown, compiled by my colleague Nathan Cheng, who keeps track of all the companies in the space, in the LongBio space, and it's growing exponentially. He also has a list of some of these companies on his website, longevitylist.com. Here's some of the investors in the space. If you're a company founder in the longevity space, you can get in touch with them. Here's a sort of a social proof slide. So here's some of the smart people, the billionaires, the famous executives, the VCs, the banks and pharma companies that are investing in this space. And these are some of the smartest people out there, people like Vitalik Buterin or Brian Armstrong in the crypto space, or Peter Thiel, famous VC, Kleiner Perkins, one of the top Silicon Valley VCs, Eli Lilly, which is the largest pharma in the world today because of the weight loss drugs. Here's a snapshot of a couple of these companies in the space, not a complete list. Here's sort of a timeline of some of the stuff that's been happening over the years. I won't go into too much depth here for time, but Google, the big tech company, partnered with AbbVie, the big pharma, to put $3 billion into longevity research, recruited the CEO of Genentech. Apollo Ventures and Cambrian were launched shortly thereafter. Altos Labs launched with $3 billion as well to do reprogramming, Yamanaka reprogramming. Evolution Foundation in Saudi Arabia is aiming to put $1 billion a year in the space. ARPA-H, the US government sort of DARPA-like program, is putting $2 billion a year into radical biotech, and then a prominent company, BioAge, IPO'd recently. So zooming out to give you an overview of the biopharma machine and how it works and how we might improve it. So I call this a wiring diagram of the biomedical economy. You can see the capital initially all comes from us, the public. It goes to government funding bodies that fund universities to do research. That intellectual property is spun out into biotech companies that are then funded by VCs, venture capitalists, that are eventually acquired by big pharma. And then you also have the capital coming from LPs investing in venture funds and public markets investing in biotech and pharmas. We can zoom in a little here. And we can see that the data goes to the regulators, the payers, and then the doctors who prescribe it, basically. There's a big problem in the pharmaceutical industry. This is called Eroom's law. It's the inverse of Moore's law. So semiconductor processing power used to double every 18 months, exponentially better. We're getting exponentially worse as an industry at getting new drugs approved in pharma. And this is discussed by my friend Jack Scannell, who coined that term. And so how is this happening? Why are we getting worse at this? Well, here are some of the reasons that I've noticed about how pharma and FDA broke medical innovation. So in economics, there's a term called erecting barriers to entry for competition. So you make it, every incumbent big industry does this, from the oil industry to defense contractors to banks. They want to reduce the amount of competition. And so they make it very complex to comply with the regulations. They make clinical trials very expensive so that only pharmas can afford them. They make it very illegal for doctors to experiment and deviate from government prescribed standard of care, or else they lose their license and their job. Another reason is biotech companies rely on venture funding and deals with pharma who can afford these later stage deals. There are just not that many biotech VCs out there. Manufacturing and marketing expenses are very expensive. Pharma is focused on that. And then furthermore, and I think this is the most important, pharma, FDA, and the government hold the same religious groupthink. They all believe the same theories, the same scientific theories that often prove to be incorrect in the end, like theories about what causes Alzheimer's, the amyloid hypothesis. So in the United States, about 90% of the grant funding that goes to all of the hundreds of universities, it comes from the government. It comes from one source that really tends to think the same thing and not be very open to new ideas. And so this is some more data basically showing that pharma is burning investors' capital when they invest in their own internal R&D. They're actually losing money when they do their own internal research. The NIH budget is also falling in inflation-adjusted terms. And this analysis also found that the types of ideas that were getting funded are less and less original. They're more and more sort of safe and incremental and not very groundbreaking because academics don't want to take any risk in their careers. So big pharma is historically asleep at the wheel. You know, you're driving your car and you fall asleep. Well, that's kind of what pharma is like. And it's not just my opinion. Jürgen Drews, the head of R&D at Roche, which is one of the most sophisticated and largest pharmaceutical companies in the world based in Switzerland, said, biotech is taking up what pharma is neglecting, carrying out research to attack the root causes of disease, which is aging primarily. And David Baltimore, who is a winner of the Nobel Prize, the president of Caltech, probably one of the best universities in the world, said regarding the biotech revolution in the 90s, quote, pharma was asleep at the wheel, unable to understand the opportunities in molecular biology and unable to take advantage of them. And then that gave rise to the biotech revolution, including companies like Genentech that became one of the most valuable biotechs of all time. So I'm just going to go through this for time because I have a lot of slides to go through, but you can check out some more talks that I've given previously. Big picture, FDA is, generally they mean well, but they're holding back innovation like many government agencies do. One of the founding fathers of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, said, was the government to prescribe to us our medicine and diet, our bodies would be in such keeping as our souls are now, which means we would not be doing very well. Things would be bad if the government controlled our medicine and our diet, and the government does control those things today. He didn't dream that would happen in his day. So there are two books you should check out. You probably have already, The Network State by Biology and The Sovereign Individual with forward by Peter Thiel. And also the Free Private Cities book by T.S. Gable, which is quite good. So what is DeSci? There's a philosopher thinker called Victor Hugo who said there's no force more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And I believe DeSci has come to that period now over the next decades. So one case study is Bitcoin. when Bitcoin came out, when it emerged, it was kind of a joke. Nobody took it seriously. All the banks said it's going to zero. And now you fast forward, 10, 15 years, the largest wealth management asset firm in the world, BlackRock CEO, changed his mind. He said before Bitcoin is bad, now he says Bitcoin is good. And so, it hit a high of 100,000 from zero in a very short period of time. It's basically digital gold, or some crypto similar to Bitcoin will fill that role as digital gold and maybe become a world reserve asset like gold is today. And you can see for scale the size of different asset classes and company stocks. So Peter Thiel is one of the smartest VCs ever. And he said the cryptocurrency revolution is as important as the internet itself. And I think in 10 years, he's going to say something similar about the DeFi movement. So what if we had capital markets on the blockchain? They're already moving that way, but for later stage companies and public stocks. But what if we did that for private companies and assets like intellectual property? And so this is a small snapshot of some of the companies in the DeFi space that are basically doing decentralized research, partnering with universities and companies to do the research that was neglected, that was not getting enough attention from the traditional funding sources. So what's the definition of DeFi? DeFi is a new paradigm to discover, disseminate, fund, and execute scientific research without relying on governments, big corporations, or centralized organizations. You put the IP on chain, you can trade it live, fractionally own it. And the decentralized approach solves the problem of scientific dogma, that groupthink, the religious thinking, and the perverse incentives in both industry and academia who have failed in their obligations to public health and scientific progress. And I think we've seen that with COVID. We've seen that with the poor health, the declining health of many countries that are otherwise rich countries. So here's some of the layers of DeFi: the infrastructure, how do we manage the data, how do we fund it through venture capital-like organizations, and then the execution in laboratories that are on the cloud, sort of automated robotic labs. So one example is VitaDAO. This is one of the first DAOs, Longevity DAO, was endorsed by Bob Nelson, one of the biggest VCs in America, Ology, of course, Vitalik, of course, etc. So you can check them out, VitaDAO. But more DAOs have been launched by our friends at Molecule or BioXYZ on many other topics, from synthetic biology, psychedelics, women's health, cryopreservation of organs, and even hair regrowth. So the future, capital market on chain, investors finance early stage science, owning shares in the patents. The new technologies are liquidly traded. Research institutions have a new source of funding, so universities can fund their labs with this. And then a whole diversity of ideas gets funded instead of just the same old stale ideas as before. And I believe that the rise of DeFi will be as important as the stock market itself in Amsterdam in 1602. So switching gears and finishing off on startup societies, our friend Nicholas Anzinger put together this list. You guys have probably seen it before, of these other startup societies. I think we will have governance as a service, and there will be many others like this. And why do we need this? Because governments are becoming more authoritarian, taxation, inflation, war, as we've seen recently. You can try to vote, cast a ballot vote. That doesn't usually work. Or you can exit and vote with your feet and try to build something new. And so that's what wealthy people are doing. They're moving out of certain regions that restrict freedom and moving to places that allow freedom or increase it. I'm actually in Portugal right now. We're getting an influx of people. I guess people have been leaving Brazil recently. So you can see here, Portugal, UAE, and Singapore, not UAE anymore, but Singapore are popular. I just escaped Dubai myself. There's a strong correlation between economic freedom and personal freedom, by the way. And so you probably heard of Prospera. There's a very cool project that I'm trying to support on the biotech side. You can go visit. They're doing conferences. You should definitely see it. It's a beautiful place and a lot of cool people. Some great friends I've met there over a series of conferences I've attended. And so throughout history, we've had a couple forms of governance. Most of it was sort of colonialism or autocracy or monarchy, and not such pleasant democratic systems. We're getting more and more democracy, but even democracy is not very good. And so there's this concept of the sovereign individual and new forms of governance that will emerge in our lifetime. And so you can see the shift from empires and emperors to feudal lords to kings and monarchs to constitutional monarchies to actual revolutionary democracies, and then kind of the highest form countries like Singapore or Scandinavia, etc. So eventually we're going to have government as a service, where government is not treating you as its property. The citizens are not property owned by the state, but they are customers. So finishing up on healthcare sovereignty, this is a very important topic across the world. And I think Brazil is unique because it's a big enough country that it can actually move the needle in its own domestic markets if you start to do some biotech at home. So Japan is a great example. Japan is one of the world leaders in regenerative medicine and stem cell biology. They have many advanced therapies that are not available anywhere else in the world. So, they just approved a potential cure for Parkinson's disease. They have therapies for arthritis. They have really amazing stuff, and it's because of their special regulatory framework that we can talk about later. So you could do something similar in Brazil, this accelerated framework. Okay, so in conclusion, there's a biomedical revolution that we have to accelerate because all of our lives depend on it. Craig Venter, who sequenced the human genome, he's one of the most famous biologists in the world. He said, if the 20th century was a century of physics, the 21st will be the century of biology. Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, said the biggest innovations of the 21st century will be the intersection of biology and technology. So with that, thank you very much for your attention. Happy to take questions if we have time, and feel free to get in touch with me on LinkedIn if you're investing in the space or you're a founder or you want to talk more. So,
thank you so much, Sebastian. So we did, can you hear me? Yeah?
Yeah.
We did run out of time. So I would advise everybody here to send questions over your X. If you're okay with that, then people can reach out there and make questions. I agree with you. People should definitely visit Prospera. It changed my worldview and it's amazing, but we are going to talk a lot about DeSci over the next month here at IP. So hopefully our participants can reach out and learn more, but congrats on all the work and thank you for making the time for us.
Cheers. Thank you. Have a nice day.